It is Friday, October 14th. Let's talk PlayStation. Hello everyone, welcome back. It's been another very busy week. There's a lot going on, so we're going to have more long-winded conversations. Bear with me, but first up, as always, our PS Plus reminder. The October PS Plus Essential Games are still live. Go claim those. And then we now know what the lineup for PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium are going to be. The lineup will go live on October 18th. And for PS Plus Extra, again, a rock-solid month, a ton of games, namely a lot of Assassin's Creed games. Chronicles for China, India, Russia, and also we see Syndicate on there, which all those games that I listed off only available on PS4 consoles because as we recently conveniently looked at, Syndicate is a problematic game on PS5 through backwards compatibility, so I believe Sony's just going to blacklist these games from the PS5's UI, although in theory I guess you could claim it on PS4, then download it on PS5, but not ideal because, yeah, Syndicate in particular does not look very good at all. It's pretty much unplayable, but there's still plenty of other good things on here. Dragon Quest Builders, you've got GTA Vice City, the Definitive Edition, which it's a little strange how that's an extra and not premium because as we've seen, Sony has a weird way of defining certain premium games because they do include native PS4 remasters of older titles that technically should fall under premium. But if we look at PS Plus Premium, we've got the Yakuza remastered games, which is more or less exactly what I'm describing. We knew those were going to be in there, but also Limbo, Ultra Street Fighter 4, and Everyday Shooter PS3 streaming, and Castlevania Lord of Shadow. I cannot believe they are actually doing this. These games were on PS Now before, and they're back. So it's just so baffling that they really did remove a large portion of the PS3 streaming catalog only to slowly drip feed them back in. I'm just blown away. That's besides the point that clearly we've gone another month without PS1 to PSP games, which is arguably what was the most exciting about that particular tier. So it's really a huge bummer when it comes to premium, but Extra so far has been fantastic. Also for Premium, we saw recently that Ridge Racer 2, again, was somewhat mistakenly labeled as a game coming this month. PS Access had a video where they talked about it, then they had to take it down, so that game's coming at some point, but it seems like it's not this month. Same with Dino Crisis. But anyway, if we get into games that are leaving PS Plus Extra and Premium, here's your call out. So only 3 games here. Red Dead Redemption, PS3 streaming. Also Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare. Those are leaving October 17th. And Soma on PS4 is leaving October 18th. So that is your call out. Play those games if you have any intention to before they leave PS Plus Extra and Premium. Now, getting into our first news story, there was yet again another PS5 system software update, this one 22.02, 06.02, and this one actually does include something beyond the standard patch notes of improving the overall system performance. In fact, the one from last week also included this, but it seems like that was not something where it reached everybody in terms of the feature being turned on. So this recent update that went out, now most players should have this, which is that Sony has consolidated and, in my view, fixed a big problem with the PS5's card system. So you might have already noticed when playing a PS5 game that uses cards, but the single player and multiplayer cards have been consolidated into one card individually. The odd thing is that for the example I'm using for Grand Theft Auto 5, this one did not use it properly. So for Grand Theft Auto 5, you can see the single player card actually includes the cards for the basic story mode and also all the online stuff as well. But basically, it's now consolidated down so you don't have a row of cards clogging up your control center. What they really fixed in a big way, though, is the trophy card, because it's no longer a trophy tracker, it's a genuine trophy card. The problem before is that, the system would often randomly select 5 or 6 trophies that may or may not be relevant to what you're actually doing in the game, and if you want to see the full list, you often had to do a lot of button presses to cycle back out of the control center or try to use a shortcut from the card to visit the full trophy list, and that was just kind of a big pain, more or less. So now with this new trophy card, you can just immediately see the full list right then and there. There's a shortcut to immediately pin it to the side of the screen, which that was there before. You could do that previously, but they've removed a lot of button presses to make this way more accessible. And the tracking is still there as well, so if you want to pin, 5 trophies up to the very top of the list, you can do that. You can still hit options and choose to reveal all hidden trophies right away, so this is way better. I'm glad that they actually did this in what was kind kind of an unexpected, unassuming, minor PS5 system software update. Now, going back to PS Plus, it's not very often at all that we ever get an example of how much Sony actually paid to make a game available on PS Plus, but sure enough, we actually found out for one game very recently. Snail Games USA, which was merged with Studio Wildcard, the developers of Ark Survival Evolved, made this SEC filing, and this is where compensation figures were revealed for these games being available on PS Plus and Game Pass. And so for PS Plus, where Ark was available back in March of this year, Sony paid $3.5 million. Microsoft, however, paid $2.5 million for Ark to be on Game Pass for 6 months, and for Ark 2, which will debut on Game Pass and stay for 3 years, that is $2.3 million. Really fascinating numbers to dissect. Really the weird one in there is Ark 2, where it's going to be on there for 3 years for only $2.3 million, whereas the first game for 6 months was more money. But it's all considered deferred revenue, so something where there's likely contingencies in there on how many players they reach and how quickly that happens and things like that. So there's still probably some context that we're missing, but the one thing we do know is that for PS Plus, the reason why that number seems so high is that PS Plus does operate a bit differently, at least when it comes to the essential tier, which is that once you claim those games, they are technically always attached to that particular user's account. So even if they unsubscribe, they can resubscribe years later, and they will never have a reason to buy Ark Survival Evolved because they claimed it for that 5-week period on PlayStation Plus. That, and there's way more PS Plus subscribers than Game Pass subscribers, and those numbers, all of it has to be considered, right? So that's why we see such wildly different terms and how much Sony and Microsoft paid for these particular deals. I thought that was just really fascinating to see recently. Moving on to some very exciting news, but God of War Ragnarök has officially gone gold, as in the game has been completed, so it's right on track for release November 9th. And that was kind of obvious, but it's always cool to see that going gold tweet from the studio at hand. So huge congratulations to everyone at Santa Monica Studio. I'm sure it was a long process, but you're finally there, and the game is almost out there for everyone to experience and try out, and one where I'm certainly very excited. And also something where if you're in the market for a PS5 for this game, then good news, Sony really likes PS5 bundles, because we saw one for Ratchet, Horizon, FIFA, MW2's getting one, and now naturally for a high-profile game like this, God of War Ragnarök. So yes, come November 9th, day and date, you can buy a PS5 with Ragnarök. I would presume Sony is planning on having a lot of stock available, hopefully, so perhaps it won't be too bad. And I am curious as to whether Sony will actually offer a price savings here, considering it is such a high-profile game that's easily going to move millions of copies. The pre-order's not up for it yet, but Horizon's $550. The MW2 one it's $560 right now, so you're getting some kind of savings there. But that's why I thought they might not do God of War so soon, because they don't want to offer it for any lower than it needs to be. But I digress. The point is, this should be available relatively soon to pre-order from PS Direct, guaranteeing that you can get a console and the game together. Next up, it looks like we didn't have to wait too long for the PC release date of Spider-Man Miles Morales. It's November 18th. So this one also relatively soon, right next to Uncharted: The Legacy of Thieves Collection and also Sackboy: Big Adventure. I'm almost curious as to if we will see any more PC releases before we, announced and released before the year closes out. So you would think Returnal is next and that it would be launching before this year is done, but we still technically don't have a formal reveal of that game just yet. Nothing but leaks. And it should be soon, I would figure, but hopefully we'll see it sooner rather than later. But for right now, at least, we have another PC game confirmed, November 18th for Miles Morales. Now, as for that Hideo Kojima game that he's been teasing a lot lately, that we don't know if it's Overdose, the Xbox project, or if it's Death Stranding 2, recently we've seen some evidence to suggest that it is in fact Death Stranding 2. So, of course, last week when we talked about how Kojima confirmed it is Elle Fanning that's going to be in this game, shortly after last week's episode, we had a producer at Kojima Productions send out this tweet saying, "So many questions, who's excited to see what's coming next? #Death Stranding." She then deleted and explained the tweet, saying that she failed to place a question mark on the hashtag, but We've seen Kojima post a lot of tweets lately with both Microsoft and SIE partners, and most recently he was posing with PlayStation marketing executives Eric Lempel and Craig Malanka. So it's not definitive, obviously, but something where it's pointing us in the direction of Death Stranding 2. So if we look at the Elle Fanning poster, some have pointed out there's the strands from Death Stranding on there. Also, there's speculation on the character Elle Fanning plays from the Death Stranding universe. And also, one has to consider that the development time might not be nearly as long as one might think. In fact, looking at the first game, where once they went into full production, it was only like, a 3.5 year dev cycle. And also we got, a video, like a teaser video, very quick. And that's the same deal here, right? So even though Norman Reedus, 4 or 5 months ago said, we just started the second game, that's plenty of time for Kojima to start doing the teasing and have some kind of teaser video ready for, let's say, the VGAs, right? That's just speculation on my part, but, they're an established studio, they're off the ground, they're comfortable with Decima, they have assets. So if this is Death Stranding 2, I think they are going to be ready to talk about this game very soon, and obviously these teases are a big indicator. Moving on to more Silent Hill evidence, which at this point, for Konami's plans for this franchise, very badly kept secret. There's so much coming out now. Nothing official just yet. We did have the rating in Korea, but this was also pretty funny. So recently, the director Christopher Gaines, who had directed the first Silent Hill movie and currently planning on doing the reboot, he was speaking with the French publication Movie and Game and just flat out confirms all the Silent Hill projects, saying he knows about them, and though he's not working directly on the games, he is still working with some of the original Team Silent members. That's what he says. Not sure if that's true because the Team Silent members are all kind of spread around doing their own things. But, he might be referring to just Konami Corporate or something, I don't know. But he does say that, yes, it is Konami developing them. And when the interviewer brings up the Bloober Team Silent Hill 2 remake, he just says, yeah, that's right. And when discussing the other games and who's developing those, he doesn't outline exactly, but he does say that there's several teams. So that's really the one mystery outside of this not being confirmed, is that we only know about Bloober Team, the Annapurna Interactive, possible smaller series of games, and then one larger main entry with a prominent Japanese developer. So, still some mystery there, but I really hope we see these soon. Moving on to some virtual reality news. This past week was mostly about Meta, but there are some PlayStation implications here because Meta announced not only the MetaQuest Pro, but they also announced the acquisition of more VR developers, Armature Studio, Twisted Pixel, and Camouflage, which Camouflage is the development team behind Iron Man VR for PSVR. So not only did they confirm that Iron Man VR is going to MetaQuest, which seems like Sony is still involved in some way. They're part of the licensing agreement, but that might be something where, because it's a Marvel property, they are just, they kind of have to let that game eventually move over. But also something where, just as a quick jumping off point, Sony might be a bit more lenient on allowing PSVR games to go to other platforms, because really this is a situation where rising tide can lift all boats. So despite MetaQuest 2 being far more popular than the current PSVR headset, it's in everybody's best interest to have, VR games kind of spread out. But anyway, the point is, Meta recently picked up Camouflage. We were looking at them recently as a possible studio working on a new PSVR 2 game, but now that might not be a reality, because with Meta, when they pick up a VR dev, they're strictly working on Meta headsets, and that's fine, but as we just discussed, it really is more beneficial to have as many games out there for as many headsets as possible. It lifts up the entire VR market, which is already kind of small and niche as is, right? So not to say Sony has to pick up like 5-6 VR devs all in one go, but I am surprised they haven't done at least one or two of them. It's something where if Sony wants to stay very committed to the VR space, they can't strictly fall on this perhaps new hybrid strategy, which is going to focus more with traditional 2D developers that are making additional VR settings for those games. And that does sound really, really cool, but you do want to be mindful of what's going on with some talented VR developers out there and them being acquired by Meta. You don't want to have to lose all that opportunity, and now Camouflage is they're not a candidate either. Moving on to a very big update for the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard and King Digital Entertainment. What happened recently was the UK's Competition and Markets Authority published their full Phase 1 findings. They initially released kind of a preliminary, like, here's some bullet points, but they put out the entire report, which is a 76-page document detailing, exactly what they've identified, concerns, hearing from Sony, from third parties, from other big publishers. And so there's a lot in there. There's no way we can cover everything, but we are going to try and cover a very good portion of this, since it seems like thus far a big problem on how this has been covered. The entire process is that so much is cherry-picked out to sort of illustrate a certain point and not necessarily the counterpoint, right? So we'll try and cover as much as we reasonably can. And before we even start reading quotes, I think people really need to understand the job regulators are, at least in theory, supposed to do. So they have to look at the market and understand how a deal like this could shift it, right? So the second page of this document published outlines how they are viewing the games business, and this might provide better context for their findings. They state that for the past 20 years, there's only been 3 companies that are the main suppliers of console gaming, and the CMA says they sought to ensure this merger would not substantially reduce current or future rivals. The CMA recognizes high-quality games are what get consumers invested into these products, and they also believe the gaming industry is in a transitional phase, with subscription services and cloud gaming coming in, which is identified as a point of opportunity for new entrants in the space, despite consoles being highly concentrated. So, in short, this isn't purely a Sony versus Microsoft console thing. The CMA is also scrutinizing cloud gaming and the potential for new competitors to finally come in. On the document, it says, and I quote, "The CMA is concerned that having full control over this powerful catalog, especially in light of Microsoft's already strong position in gaming consoles, operating systems, and cloud infrastructure, could result in Microsoft harming consumers by impairing Sony's, Microsoft's closest gaming rival, ability to compete, as well as that of other existing rivals and potential new entrants who could otherwise bring healthy competition through innovative multi-game subscriptions and cloud gaming services. The CMA recognizes that ABK's newest games are not currently available on any subscription service on the day of release, but considers that this may change as subscription services continue to grow. After the merger, Microsoft would gain control of this important input and could use it to harm the competitiveness of its rivals." Now, the CMA also references Microsoft's other recent acquisitions and specifically calls out the difference of these developers having shipped software on multiple consoles. Studios like ZeniMax Media, Obsidian, inXile, Ninja Theory, and Compulsion. Microsoft's response is that many of these developers released games for rival platforms after the acquisition. The CMA recognizes in the short to medium term that Sony would be the most impacted, also clarifying that Nintendo competes less closely with Sony and Microsoft due to their games being more family-oriented. The CMA also says Microsoft's internal documents track PlayStation more closely than Nintendo, with them being often absent from internal competitive assessments. And when speaking to other third-party publishers, they also outline these same differences of Nintendo's model versus Sony and Microsoft. SIE directly cited that even if Call of Duty remained on PlayStation, Microsoft may pursue exclusive content, enhanced versions, or Game Pass benefits. The CMA also confirms that no agreement has actually been made between Sony and Microsoft to extend Call of Duty, but that such an agreement can't be considered here due to the possible avenues Microsoft could take to eventually leverage some kind of exclusivity. Now, Microsoft offered plenty of responses to all of these, and we do have some redacted info here that would have given us some real numbers, but Microsoft claims again that removing Call of Duty isn't financially viable, that between 2024 and 2028, for that strategy to work, a redacted percentage of COD players would need to purchase an Xbox, a figure that would be implausibly high. Both Sony and Microsoft provided some numbers, and while Microsoft seemed more plausible, they were both deemed incomplete. Microsoft explains similar exclusive strategies like Rise of the Tomb Raider can often damage reputations, and then provided more metrics on how PlayStation is currently superior to Xbox, citing install base, monthly active users, and a large portfolio of exclusive content. Further along the document, there's a ton of redacted info for internal Microsoft documents on the incentive of removing content from competitors. The CMA then explains that Microsoft holds a strong position in cloud gaming and subscription, where they keep their games for their services only. Now, Microsoft also told GamesIndustry.biz separately in a statement that even if every single Call of Duty player left Sony for Xbox, PlayStation would still be significantly larger, and they also point out Sony's recent acquisitions and claim there were over 280 first and third-party exclusive games on PlayStation in 2021, nearly 5 times more than Xbox. And when it comes to removing content, Microsoft says, and I quote, Xbox as a platform which is in last place in console, 7th place in PC, and nowhere in mobile game distribution globally, has no incentive to do this. Instead, its incentive is to encourage the widespread adoption of cloud gaming technologies by as many providers as possible to encourage the major shift in consumer behavior required for cloud gaming to succeed. The CMA's second phase investigation will reveal their findings in January, with the full report March 1st. And that's those are some of the main key points, and it's a lot of back and forth, obviously. And as we've mentioned before, it's Sony really exaggerating the situation, right? They don't look good at all here when they claim that, even if they acquire them, even if Call of Duty stays on PlayStation, they can still do exclusive content. Like, okay, well, let's not go there because we all know how bad that's going to look because you currently hold that agreement with Call of Duty. Of course, as we've mentioned before, Sony is going to have to say everything they possibly can because why wouldn't they? They're just doing their job. Jim Ryan's doing his job, lawyers are doing their jobs, but still a very poor look. But there's that. Microsoft, of course, is going to continue downplaying the entire thing, although we can see that they're certainly at least admitting certain things, like giving a timeline of 2024, 2028 as an example. That's more or less Microsoft, again, revealing that they certainly intend to at some point pull the game from Sony. There's internal documents suggesting that they've, analyzed the benefits of removing games from the competition. And, we all know why Microsoft did this. They want to ship these games on Game Pass, and they want to also in theory, leverage the content to the best of their possible abilities. And if that means removing them from PlayStation where applicable, they can certainly do that at some point. They say it's not financially viable, but the parent company can certainly eat any losses if necessary. There's a lot of that, right? Saying that, oh, we're not even that good, right? We're in third place. They'll still be ahead of us. But there's so much of that still going on. And, I do admit that if you read the full 76-page document, which I know most people are not going to want to do, but sitting through it, I was actually surprised at how thorough they actually were. It's weird because I'm seeing some folks read the whole thing or claim they read the whole thing and go, saying it's ridiculous or this and that. Again, it really is like a pick a side kind of thing, but it's really a fascinating document to go through because they actually were a bit more thorough than I think some people are being led to believe. So again, it's really hard when you only see one or two things on Twitter, which Twitter has a max character count of 280, and so people are only screenshotting like one or two paragraphs and trying to illustrate their point. It's really best if you want to know the whole thing to at least try and read through as much as you possibly can of it. But going into our next news story, which this kind of goes hand in hand with everything we just talked about, but and as far as I know, this is the first time where we're getting confirmation of this actually being a thing, despite us kind of already knowing this likely happened. But it is confirmed from Microsoft that Sony has blocked Game Pass from being available on PlayStation. So in another follow-up statement where Microsoft is responding to more criticisms, they say, and I quote here, "Nor is there any basis for the idea that acquiring Call of Duty could tip subscription services in Xbox's favor. Sony has chosen to block Game Pass from PlayStation, so it is not available on PlayStation. As all games that are available on Game Pass are also available to purchase, PlayStation gamers will continue to have the ability to buy Call of Duty on PlayStation, and doing so will cost less than the cost of switching by buying a new Xbox console. This increased competition has not been welcomed by the market leader Sony, which has elected to protect its revenues from sales of newly released games rather than offer gamers the choice of accessing them via its subscription, PlayStation Plus." Now, again, we always kind of knew that Microsoft has tried to get Game Pass on PlayStation in some way. We just don't know how many times they tried, and also how those conversations went outside of Sony laughing at them and saying no, obviously. But it is weird hearing Microsoft phrase it this way, where they say Sony has blocked it, almost like Microsoft feels like they just, deserved to be on PlayStation by, like, what they do, like sign up to PlayStation's dev portal like anybody else and just try to, like, go about this without talking about it. Like, no, like, it's not like they didn't reach out to third-party relations or some sort of head of applications on PlayStation and try to start that conversation. But of course, Sony was likely very, very firm on saying no, because why would they want Game Pass on PlayStation? The thing is, the only way I could ever see Sony allowing it at all is if it's, strictly first-party content, because that's what they don't have on PlayStation, and therefore they're not necessarily losing anything outside of just gaining a cut out of Game Pass now on PlayStation, right? But that would be something where Sony ensures that all these, multi-platform third-party games continue shipping on PlayStation, and in fact, Sony would now, in theory, possibly start getting native versions of, Xbox games like Forza, Halo, Fable, right? All these other upcoming projects from Xbox Game Studios. And so that's the only way I could see this even possibly being humored. But if we're talking, whatever sort of possible cross-platform catalog could be offered with native PS4 and PS5 games, they're not going to do that, especially because Game Pass, it's very well known at this point that, there's situations where those games can cannibalize the individual purchase of those games. Now, some developers, it's always been very, there's been a wide spectrum on developers saying that you got to be on Game Pass. If you're not going to do well on Xbox. Some say it's great, obviously, being on it and then off it, because then it generates a lot of interest and more people are exposed to that game. It's a lot of, there's mixed reactions so far, largely positive, I will say, and that's obviously a good thing. Microsoft is the one paying those developers. It's not a bad thing, obviously, but it's certainly something where Game Pass on PlayStation would cannibalize individual purchases, which Sony's been very firm on. They want PlayStation to be profitable, and so Game Pass is not going to be a reality on Sony consoles for a very long time. And the reason why Microsoft would be okay with Game Pass on PlayStation is because they're long game here, and they've admitted this, they've more or less admitted this a long time ago that, selling Xbox consoles, great, fantastic. Of course, they would love to be number one there, but they sort of recognized a while ago that that may never be a reality. So you might as well get the jump on what is the next big thing in gaming, and some companies believe it's subscription and cloud gaming. And that's why Microsoft, as a parent company, is going to loss lead and do what they can to eventually make that stuff work. Because we all suspect, they likely are not profitable with the Xbox division. Game Pass playing a possible factor in that. Sony wants to stay profitable, and the thing is, it's not like, again, Microsoft would love to sell a ton of Xbox consoles, but what would they value more nowadays? More subscribers or more Xbox consoles? It's subscribers, so that's why they have no problem putting Game Pass on PlayStation if that was an avenue they could realistically pursue. So despite them being close competitors, and there's certainly examples where Microsoft wants to, compete in a way where they're taking games away from PlayStation, that they want to put them in a very difficult position. A lot of these acquisitions are certainly doing that because of the entire situation we currently have, but yeah, Sony does not want Game Pass right now, and I think a lot more would have to happen for that to eventually be a reality, which I don't see anytime soon. Anyway, moving on to our next news story. Of course, the running theme lately has been that PS5 stock has been a lot better, and now we've got a way to actually gauge just how much better it actually is, because David Gibson on Twitter, the senior analyst at MST Financial, recently sent out this tweet showcasing PS5 stock, and that in September, it was a 400% year-over-year increase, which is substantial, and that kind of explains why we've seen PS5s actually sit in stock for hours, days at a time. First it was the Horizon bundle, and now it's the basic consoles that can sit for a while as well. And David also makes he speculates that Sony's planning on having a lot of these for, or they're saving stock for God of War. So, and we kind of got at that earlier about how they likely are planning to have a lot of PS5s ready to go for Ragnarok. And on the flip side of this, for PS5 sales in the UK, we're also seeing that PS5 finally hit the 2 million console milestone, and it was the fourth fastest selling console to do so in UK history, pretty much matching PlayStation 3, but still behind PS4, PS2, and Wii. PS5 and PS3 got the job done in 98 weeks. And seeing it right next to PS3 is fascinating, because we all know if there were more PS5s to go around, it's just, that's always been the big question, is how many How many consoles could they have really sold if stock was not a problem? We'll never know, obviously, but it wouldn't surprise me if they were able to become number one if they did make enough of these things. Next up, let's talk about the recently acquired Haven Studios, because they also did a bit of a mini press junket based on the recent news that they moved into their new studio, and they had kind of a big celebration. And recently, when speaking with Stephen Totilo of Axios, they talked about what's going on with Haven and their goals, which one goal is to have that server-based approach for more collaboration. You may remember we talked about this, 4 or 5 months ago, somewhere around there, where Haven talked about this effort to really, I don't know if revolutionize is the right word, but reduce bottlenecks when it comes to game development. So PS5 architect Mark Cerny has been involved in this initiative and working with Haven, and he describes it like using Google Docs, but instead of a document, it's a level in your game. So progress and changes would be visible to all collaborators in real time. And we're hearing that more than 30% of Haven's 115 developers are working on these cloud-based tools, AI, and machine learning. They do admit it's still early in the process, with years of work to go while working on their first game, but so far at least it sounds encouraging. And the thing is, knowing Mark Cerny is involved, and there's the financial backing of Sony, of course, it's if I had heard this from a brand new startup studio, I would think, oh, yeah, okay. It's always, there's a lot of skepticism in what is a brand new studio, and they always have these big picture ideas about how they're going to change the world with their project and how it's so much different, and, they're working on this new AI system, or, we've heard a lot of that stuff. But to hear that their progress thus far warranted being acquired by Sony already, and the longtime industry veteran Mark Cerny being directly involved, that puts a lot more confidence in what they're actually saying, right? But it's still a bit iffy, but it's really Mark where it's, that's a big deal. He's been such a driving force in this industry. There are things he did, 20, 30 years ago that are still commonplace today in the games business, like the Cerny method, right? So he's made so many vital contributions. So to see him so excited and involved in this initiative, I think actually means that there's something to what they're doing there, instead of this being the expected vaporware that you might see from other startup studios. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, and if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. You can follow the link down below. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all. And recently we had 2 videos go up. On Sunday was a PS5 tips video for maximizing storage on PS5. Go check it out. And then Tuesday was a new trophy video. Been a while since we did one. No, we won't do a 30 Platinums video this year. Next year I'm planning on doing it, but for now at least, we did something kind of similar where I finally edited the footage from my attempt of earning the Platinum trophies in Killzone Mercenary and Shadowfall before the servers go offline. So if you want to see that wacky journey, go check it out. And that's pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.